First lightning talk, who's from one of our speakers last year, Marcia, talking a little bit more about writing tighter.
Thank you. Woo! It's great to be back. I love Write the Docs. I gave a talk last year, and my one goal was that whoever went home and saw me would remember one thing. Does anybody here remember what that one thing was? Somebody say out loud if you can, if you remember. Get rid of the garbage words, and in particular, what did I want you to see everywhere in your writing? See, be verbs, awesome, you guys remembered. So this is, again, I'm reiterating last year's theme, and I give it a little bit of a different spin this year. Every time I talk about this, people think I'm saying beavers, so just for the record, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about be, is, are, am, was, has been, will be, will have been, being. Any form of be verbs in your writing can be a flag for you to tighten it and strengthen it and make it more readable. And one of the benefits, actually, before I jump to that, Amy Brown, who was here last year. Anybody remember Amy or know Amy? Awesome. What I would love for you guys all to do who are tweeting is give Amy a little bit of love right now, because she, last February, 9 months after Write the Docs, sent me this, or she tweeted this message. She's using this tip all the time. Man, that getting rid of be verbs rule is the gift that just keeps giving, solid gold. And I really find this in my own writing every day as well. That's why I love sharing this tip. So why does this help? Anybody out there doing this now? Want to give an answer? I saw some hands. Max, I saw your hand. Say really loud, why does this help you? It's so effective. Say it again. Oh, well, I can help you with your stage fright later. We'll talk about that. When you get rid of be verbs, you tighten up your writing. It's more engaging. And one of the benefits, which is what I'll focus on in my bit of time here, is translation cost. One word in one language costs about how much? Any volunteers about how much you pay? About a quarter, I heard somebody say over here, and that's an average that I use as an estimator. And I've actually put together a spreadsheet, which I'm going to walk you through here to give some idea. If you're translating now, you know how expensive it gets really fast. This is an example of a sentence from one of the workshops that I do, and a group took from their own work this sentence, and they said, wow, we've got 3 be verbs here. This is the before example. That's 14 words. It would cost $3.50 to translate this sentence. If you're talking 25 languages, that's $87.50. And if you've got content the size of a Harry Potter novel, anybody think your web page is at least that big? We got a lot of content out there. We're talking millions of dollars for translation at the high end. So just getting rid of one be verb, this team in my workshop got down to 10 words, and they saved a couple $100,000. And then we said, well, what happens if you get rid of more of those be verbs? And they kept going. And they increased their savings. This is the green is how much they saved by getting rid of be verbs, $350,000. And they took it down to no be verbs. And they saved $500,000 if they extend that amount of crunching their words. And it's more readable. So I would like all of you to take this home with you. Look for be verbs in your writing. And you may not be doing any translating now, but listen to Eric Holscher, who says in one of his blog posts recently, translating your documentation is really important. toward helping people learn to program. Someone shouldn't have to learn programming in English at the same time. So be thinking about translation, be thinking about V-verbs. I have a lot more to say in my book about B-verbs and all kinds of other things. And I'm giving my workshop at LavaCon here in October. I'd love to have you come and we'll tear your writing apart. Thank you very much. See B-verbs.
And next up is Dirk Myers talking about test the docs. I kind of have this thing in my life where it's verb the docs. So this fits just right into my mental worldview.
So we'll give that one try and see if it works. If not, I'll do it without the slides. Nope, cool, no slides. Okay, so this is about testing documentation, and while you're testing documentation, testing your product, testing your API, testing how this is landing with your customers. So a little bit of background. I work for a company called 60 East, which is a very small company. There are 8 of us spread across 5 different states. We do software for some of the largest financial companies in the world. So with those 8 people, we support thousands of deployments in hundreds of locations around the world. We've typically spread by word of mouth, where someone takes the product with us when they change institutions. We're starting to get known enough that we're being used by people that have not used the product before. So now people have heard about it, are downloading the product, and are starting to work with it. This is creating a problem for us because the people that are digging into the product don't have that deep institutional knowledge, didn't grow up with us over the years that we've been around, and are trying to start with a blank slate. So we've decided that we need to do more testing. We need to know what happens when someone downloads the product for the first time and starts trying to get an application going. One of the problems is that we've all been so deeply involved with the product. We've all been so deeply involved with customer support. We've all been so deeply involved with existing customers that we're not good judges of who our new customers are and what they need. So what we've done is we've outsourced our documentation testing and our API testing. And what we've done is we've done deals with other companies, some testing companies and some just exchanges with other startups, where we give them a requirements spec where we say, we need you to write an application that has these characteristics and presents these interfaces to the customer. Then we give them our SDK, we give them our support line and the ability to file bugs against us, and we give them a deadline. At the end of that deadline, they return the code to us. During the time that they work with the product, they file bugs against us just as though they're an external customer. They have no access to our internal development team, and so we are effectively piloting what happens when someone downloads the product and tries to get their app up and running. So what we found out of this is that new customers file vastly different bugs than people that have been working with the product for a long time. Not surprising at all. What's surprising to us is that the bugs that people are filing are not bugs that we thought were gaps in our product or gaps in the docs. You know, there are always things that you know you can do better. There are things that you know are weak out there that you're just itching for a customer to come up and say, please fix this for us so that you can get to work on it. The customers didn't file those bugs. They filed bugs that were much more focused on, now I've got this, I have your awesome API docs, I have this awesome spec. What do I do now? None of the problems that we saw were, where we thought we were imprecise or we thought that there were versioning conflicts. In doing this, we've backed up the bugs that we found into our development process, and so we've changed how we've been doing things to where we now write the docs first. We run those docs by prospective customers and have them tell us, given this doc and this feature and this requirements spec, what would you do next? How would you implement this? What kind of code would you expect to write to make this work? And our first release using this technique is coming out in another month or so. But what we found in doing acceptance tests with our existing customers and doing preview with our existing customers is that they're much happier with the documentation. We're lowering support costs because they're just finding what they need. We're not going through the discovery process where we do something really wonderful, we drop it out to our customers, and they go, everything is here, it's beautiful, except for the one thing that I really wanted to know. So that's about all the time that I have. Thanks.
All right. Can everyone just like wave at me so I can take a photo? Keep waving. All right. That'll almost be like the selfie heard around the world. Next up is Ann Gentle about open source docs the hard way.
Hey everybody, I'm a little bit of a unicorn. I'm an extroverted technical writer. I want to get to know each and every one of you, and I thought an efficient way of doing that is for me to talk about what I do. A little strange, but sure. You know, I work in Austin, Texas, where we like to keep it weird, but I come to Portland and I'm like, man, Austin's only weird because we're in the middle of conservative Texas. So today I'm here and I want to talk about some big numbers. That is a big number. Look, it's taller than me. This is another big number. It was painted in large format. What I want to talk about is these are big numbers, but they're actually the number of documentation contributors I had who wrote half of the documentation for the open source project I work on, OpenStack. Half the documentation written by 3 writers. 6 months later, I had 7 writers write half of the documentation. So that's why I want to talk about open source docs the hard way. This is all hard, and we work our butts off just to get that kind of result. But the thing is, there were 130 doc contributors overall. So even though 7 wrote half, we got a ton of those long tail submissions of areas where people kind of knew what they were talking about, and I might not have that depth of knowledge. So when there's 910 overall OpenStack contributors, I have to wonder, am I getting the right number of contributors? And that's what I'm going to keep continuing to grow and grow and grow. So what are some of the techniques we use to get these big numbers? Maybe I'll back up a little bit. OpenStack is open source cloud computing so that any organization can either run their own private cloud or get access to public clouds at Rackspace, at HP, different places. So they can use compute on demand, they can use storage as much as they need, they can network their computers together and do amazing things, right? So OpenStack is a planet cloud, it's for everyone. And it's a very intrinsic part of our culture that we believe that this should be shared, we believe it should be written collaboratively, and so the documentation has to be the same way. And since we're so developer-centric, we actually treat our docs like code. So one of the things we've employed recently was the idea of a book sprint. And Ali talked about doc sprints. And what we do is we actually still believe a book is a good thing to have. You don't have to plug it in, you don't have to charge it. You can take it on the plane, you can take it on a bus, you can read it out loud at bedtime and go to sleep. It's awesome. So we actually flew people in from Australia, Canada, all over the world who had been operating OpenStack at scale for 6 months or longer and hired a book sprint facilitator, Adam Hyde, and knocked out, I want to say, a 240-page book in a week, 5 days. And one of the authors I recruited likes to say, you know, Ann, we wrote that book in 3 days, and the last day and a half we're editing. And I'm like, yes, it's true. But that's 10,000 words a day some days. And that doesn't mean it was original writing each day. These guys had training documentation internally that they donated to the community effort. And we came up with this, the OpenStack Operations Guide. And we actually sold it in the community for a while, Creative Commons licensed. Anybody else could print copies if they wanted to. But guess what? O'Reilly was having trouble finding authors. And they actually approached us and said, would you be interested in having us publish your operations guide? We're having trouble finding people who can write this. And I was like, let's talk some more. How open are you with licensing? What are you actually interested in? What channels for your publishing do we actually get access to? And you know what? It was a fantastic arrangement. They gave us professional developmental editors. They gave it a copy edit like nobody's business. They indexed the entire thing. This is awesome. So I want to talk about this. This is now a 300-page book. We ended up with almost 50 contributors on it if you count translations and the tooling and all of the stuff that goes around it. So we're trying to build a community around this book. And about 6 months later, 12 people sat down in a bunker in Maryland and wrote the OpenStack Security Guide. These were people who were the only people in the world, really, who knew how to secure OpenStack clouds. This next summer, we're going to do another one about how to design and architect OpenStack clouds. And again, by people who have been doing this and working on this for a while. So what are some other techniques? I think that it means reviewing each other's documentation like code. I loved the speaker who was like, what can we borrow from developers? And in OpenStack, we're borrowing everything from developers. We have, 70 reviews. Oh, that's my stopwatch. I have 431 on mine. Okay, can I go quick? Yep. Okay. So anyway, I want to just say, I have bet my career on these techniques. I think a lot of people here believe in it too, and so I want to make sure that we can build this community of practice around community documentation. So, when a glossary appears out of nowhere, that's community documentation. And when somebody volunteers their time to do a copy edit on your docs, that's community documentation. So, we're going to have an unconference at 3 downstairs if you want to join us and learn more about community docs or bring us your techniques. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. All right, next up is Dan Stevens with Write, Measure, and Repeat.
Hi, my name's Dan, and this may be a big mistake. I don't have any slides or anything, but I wanted to talk about something that I'm really excited about. I'm new to Atlassian. I work on the Bitbucket product line, and one of the things that we're trying to do is change the way we think about information solutions. And one of the things that I don't think we do very well in documentation is measure results and really track towards goals. And so we took on a project about 2 months ago where we gathered together in Sydney and we talked about how do we make documentation measurable and repeatable. And the first thing we did was ask, what are the questions we need to ask? And what are we trying to achieve? And so we began by looking at how do we plan for a documentation project? And what goals are we trying to achieve? Beyond just writing really good, technically accurate documentation, what are we really trying to help the user do? And are we also using our technical documentation to meet business goals? And then how do we measure those things? And so one of the first things I thought was, I don't want to be a marketing writer. But that really is the wrong way to look at it. If we're achieving goals that the software is designed for our customers to achieve, then we're measuring the right thing. So we started asking questions like, in the documentation, can we lead them from the software to the docs and back to achieve a specific feature adoption? One of the product I work on, Bitbucket, I rewrote one of our tutorials and started to watch for how many people went through that tutorial. And we had about 48,000 people enter the first line. And one of my first business goals was to get people to create a repository and make their first code commit to that repository. And so I could measure, based on the number of people who went through my tutorial and correlating that with the number of people who created new repositories, how many people went through the tutorial and met that first business goal. And in the last 2.5 months, I've had 9,000 people go through that tutorial and meet that first business goal. And then of those 9,000 people, I created another part of it to drive to add a new one of the new features we added was the ability to add a new file. And so out of those 9,000 people, 5,000 people created a new file. And one of the things that I want to do with that is begin to look for repeatable, repeatable projects, repeatable ways that, what documentation methods help us to achieve those goals, and how do we make those repeatable? And so we're beginning to set up experiments with our growth hacking team. And I think we can learn a lot from our growth hacking, from the growth hacking movement, and taking those things. So what we're doing is we're creating events within the software to measure at what points people come in and out of the software between different information solutions. And then from that, we're beginning to integrate information solutions within our software themselves. And because we create events, we can measure how many people and get a percentage. How many people who accessed the tutorial or how many people who accessed the help adopted that feature or made that upgrade. And then we put that into our marketing and development cycle. So I believe that we can show more and more and more how we in documentation add value to the product and how we can become not just a cost center, it's something that many, many people have said, by proving what we do and the value that it has. Thanks.
We have Chuck talking about EPUB in a nutshell.
Hi there. Hello? Okay, I'll take this one. Okay, so my last name is unpronounceable, but I'll tell you it later. So as a former O'Reilly editor, this is EPUB in a nutshell. So what is EPUB? Basically, it's a website that's packed in a folder with some HTML, CSS, and XML files, and that's pretty much just it. So in order to do EPUB, all you need to know is basic HTML, CSS. You have to be comfortable with XML, and you have to know how to run some zip commands at the command line. So why EPUB? It's portable, it's searchable, it's bookmarkable, and it's shareable. So you can select some text in an EPUB and copy it and send it to somebody else. Or if it's code, you can copy that code and paste it into whatever it is that you're writing your code in. So as a documentation writer, this is the bane of my existence, PDF. And knowing that, you'll appreciate the next bit. PDF stands for Pretty Dead Format. It's made for print, it's not made for sharing, although a lot of people think that it is. So, how do you learn this EPUB thing that I'm speaking of? The easiest way is just find an EPUB file and unpack it. All you have to do is run unzip, followed by the file name at the command line, and then you can view the source. So if you're a former web developer like I am, you know that that's the way you learned how to do basic web development in the early days. So it's basically a form of documentation, dumpster diving. So now we're going to demo this thing. Okay, so this is the basic structure of an EPUB. As you can see, there's an EPUB folder, there's a meta-int folder, there's a MIME type folder, and these things contain all of your contents. So the MIME type, basically, this is the first bit that you have to load into your EPUB file, and it basically tells the application that reads it, hey, I'm an executable, I'm a book, read me. Next up, this is all of your source for your book. So you've got art, which is, hey, I've got the cover. That didn't work. Okay. And then CSS, basically just a single CSS file that lays out all of the format for your entire book. And then you've got HTML files. So these contain everything that's within your book. And it uses the CSS that you apply to it. And then finally, the XML bit, the OPF file, or the open package file. So basically, this is what sets up everything that you need for your book. So look at this like it's a bit of a manifest. So this lists everything that's in your EPUB file and tells the EPUB reader what kind of file type it is. So basically you list everything that's in your book, then you get down to the bottom part, and here's your spine. So basically the spine tells the reader, present these things in this order. That's it. That's EPUB. It's pretty simple. And a couple of the other presenters have talked about having a trackable form of knowing who and where your documentation is being read. So I work at the Omni Group up in Seattle. We started distributing our user documentation in EPUB format. It's free, it's DRM free. We make it available on the iBookstore because that's where our customer base is. When we release a new EPUB, we get spikes of up to 3,000 to 4,000 units a day. When we're not releasing software, we're still distributing about 200 to 300 copies a day of our EPUBs. This gives us a tangible way of tracking who's using our stuff. So who's in charge of EPUB? It's a group called the International Documentation Publishing Forum, or the IDPF. They handle all of the specs and standards, and again, if you know HTML and CSS, all you can do is go to W3C or MDN, which was a great source for trying to learn a lot of this stuff. And that's it. My name's Chuck Toporek. I'm Chuck Dude on Twitter. If you want to know more about EPUB, let me know.